All right, welcome to Friday Lab, everyone.
Yay.
Woo! Keep the energy going in this one, right? Woo! Gotta get through these Fridays. I want you guys to have fun. Like, if we can talk in lecture, we can definitely talk in lab. So I want you guys to have fun here. If you have questions, if you have thoughts, you know, feel free to share. Like, I want you guys to enjoy coming here on Fridays and be excited about these projects you're doing. So to start off the week, how are your blogs going? Anyone have any questions? Woo! I know it's like we're doing like a... You what?
I feel like I'm in a spin class because they're always like yelling.
I know, I was just thinking the same thing. I'm like,
on the mic.
I could be like... I actually go to spinning in the morning, so... Yeah, Grace.
I know last week you covered how to make your images less pixelated when you're doing that. Would you mind recapping that at some point? Because I tried to do it and it didn't seem to work.
Yeah, let me remind me at the end. All right, I want to go over one quick thing because I got a few questions about this. Well, two things. Is everybody good on embedding? Is anyone taking screenshots? Because we want you guys actually embedding your social media into a post.
Can you just review that?
Okay.
Post the link. Is it just
That's what I thought, yeah. So let me just show you. So if I go over here, and again, let me go back. So I'm on a Twitter page. So if I go up here and you need to grab an actual tweet, not just a page. So if I go in here and I click on the timestamp, see how when I scroll down, it's just this tweet. It's not the whole feed. So this is the unique URL just for that tweet. So I'm literally just going to copy that URL. I'm going to go back to my dashboard and create a post. And over here, I want to make sure, again, I'm in my visual tab, not my text tab. Literally, all I have to do is cut and paste it into the body. That's it, and it will embed it for me. So make sure you guys are doing that and not like taking a picture of the tweet. And the other thing is, remember the point of this assignment is to be retweeting things with the ASCJ 200 hashtag. So make sure that you do that first on your social media and then you embed it. So make sure that you have that hashtag there. Yeah, I mean, again, like we said, you want it to be kind of related to the class and things that we're talking about in class. And if you're not sure, come and see one of us and we can kind of try to guide you. But right now, I would say it's more open rather than narrowed in on anything. Just, you know, we want you guys just kind of playing with social media and being out there. So make sure you do 3 every week. Yeah.
It's a general question. Is there any way we could put the link for the one that gives us the black sidebar up again? Because I know when you go to wordpress.com, it kind of lets you edit and customize, but I know that dashboard one had a specific link.
For widgets?
Oh, that's the WP admin access.
There you go.
So at the
Yeah,
end of
so
your
see up
address.
here, it's WP-admin.
Okay. Okay. Got it.
Yeah, and you guys probably want to just bookmark that on your browsers. It's really annoying that there's no quick link for that anymore. So the other thing, and again, you guys, you're the directors of your own site, but there's one thing that I'm going to ask you to do. And that's because it's just going to make grading a heck of a lot easier for all of us. And shoot, I already did it on here. And that is to create a menu item for all of your blog posts. And I'm going to walk you through how to do that. It's just, again, you guys can organize your site however you want to, but I'm going to ask you to do this one just because it's going to be a lot easier for us. So what you want to see up here, how in my menu I have ASCJ 200 with a hashtag. And when I click there, it shows me those blog posts. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So when I'm adding a new post, if I go down here to where it says categories, I already created a hashtag. Oh, I do hear an echo. Do you guys hear an echo?
Yeah, it's the microphone. I think that mic's maybe.
It shouldn't be this, but you know what? That might be on. You're right. Is it really annoying, you guys?
No, I don't really hear it.
Justin, do you hear it? I hear it. It's weird.
Yeah, I feel like it's only coming out of the speaker for some reason.
Yeah.
All right, as long as you guys validate I'm not crazy, because I feel like I'm Max Headroom and I'm like in a TV. Okay, so I created this one for the session this morning. I'm going to recommend you guys, you can call it social media, hashtag ASCJ200, just something in that genre. I'll create another one called social media. So again, over here in my categories, I'm adding a new category. And then, so every time I make one of these social media posts for the week, I'm going to go over here and make sure that I click that new category I just made. And then again, you always have to publish and save your changes. Okay, so I have this post. So now what I'm going to do, again, in my WP-admin in this dashboard, I'm going to go down to where it says appearance and go down to where it says menus. And if you guys haven't created a menu yet for your site, that's something you're going to want to do. That's again, on this theme, the menu is prominent. It's right up here at the top. So this is what I'm doing. I'm creating these categories. So in menu, see over here how it's showing me my menu structure? Again, and in a menu, you can add anything to it. So it's not just pages. It can be anything. I would say for this class, the only thing you might add to these sites that's going to be a page. Because again, what's the difference to a page and a post? Does anyone remember? Anyone?
A page and a post or page and a category?
A page versus a post.
A post is your one specific like document, I guess you could say, that you've written, your body of text or your tweets that you put in there.
Yeah.
And a page is, we'll pull all of them up that you have decided to put on that page rather than your home page, I guess. It's more specific, it's more refined.
Kind of. Let me pull up a blog. So here we have a blog. So if I click on all these things, it's essentially a blog, but it's kind of curating what kind of content I might find. So if I'm going to Portland and I want to find where to go for food, see how these all have a timestamp here? These are all blog posts, but it's directing me through having a category where I can find all the blog posts that are about food. Because this blog's been going on for a few years and I don't want to scroll through like 100 pages of it just to find what's food related. It's curating that blog for me in a way that kind of helps me navigate it. And see how all of these have timestamps, which is called dynamic. So it means that like this content is always changing. Things are being added and I can see a timestamp on it. If I click over here where it says about, this is what's called a static page, and that means that it's not something you're going to be updating every day or adding to. You kind of put it out there once. You might go back once in a while and tweak it, but it's pretty much there. So you guys could consider doing like an about me page for these sites if you want to talk about yourself or the class or kind of establish that, you can. But everything else on your site, I would say, is going to be a blog post. So going back to this menu, so I could create an about me page and add that to my menu. I want to draw your attention down here to where it says categories, because I can also add a category to that menu. So I'm going to scroll down, and you might want to click on where it says view all, just to make sure that you see everything. And I'm going to go down to where it says social media. That's the one I just created. And I'm going to add it to my menu. So over here now, I can see it listed under my menu structure. And I'll move this over here just so you see. I'm going to go ahead and move this a little bit to the right under ASCJ200 hashtag. And I'm going to save my menu. Bless you. And so now when I refresh my site, see now next to ASCJ200 how there's this little drop down arrow? So I just added this submenu under there. Again, this doesn't really make sense, but just to kind of show you how I can add a menu item and a submenu item. So I'm going to go back here. I probably wouldn't want to do that. So I'm moving this over to the left and I'm saving it. Yeah.
Sorry, can you go back to when you first added the social media tab?
The category or in the menu? Okay. So when I go to posts, I'm going to add a new post. And so down here in my right hand corner, there's a categories bar. And I want to click right here where it says add new category.
Okay.
and that's where you create one.
Mine's not coming up under manuscripts when I clicked on it. I don't have like the.
You have to create a menu. Justin's gonna come over and show you. Anyone else?
So I created my menu.
Uh-huh.
Just add menu. Can you go back to that page where you like
Add stuff because it says
Yeah.
add menu items in the column on the left, and I click on the categories.
Okay, so let's add news. So I'm gonna click news and add it to my menu. So now I see it over here in my structure. And I'm gonna save my menu.
So, and to be clear, an ASCJ 200 category is for blog posts, and a social media category is for Twitter.
Well, no, I'm just typing stuff in here to show you guys.
Okay.
Like I said, these two are synonymous, so I wouldn't use both of them.
Right.
I use hashtag ASCJ 200. I think for me that makes the most sense. If you guys want to call it social media, I mean, it's up to you, but I would call it something of that vein.
So is it okay to like have like a Twitter tab and then a blog post tab?
You could, but you don't really need a blog post tab because your blog is going to be on the homepage already. But what you're doing is, see, like here, Christy's entire site is essentially a blog with the exception of this About Me page. But see how she has all these different categories there for me to kind of organize it. So she doesn't really have one that says blog, but she's kind of sifting through by type what all the blog posts are about. So think about, doing the same thing on yours. I mean, the thing you really want to do it for is social media, right? Because you guys are going to have like 16 of those posts by the end of this. You could consider doing one for like video, photography, as you start doing other assignments. You guys can also be adding, just stuff to the site if you want to. But this is the one that I want you guys to do for sure. Again, you can call it hashtag ASCJ200, social media, whatever you want to call it. But just so it's easy for us when we're grading to know where these posts are to make sure you guys get credit every week. All right, anything else about WordPress? All right, before we move on, there's just a few laundry items I want to tell you guys.
I have a question.
Yeah. Yeah.
I posted the links, but when I publish my blog, it doesn't like come up. Any of the Twitter posts.
Did you add it as a category?
Yeah.
I'm going to have, hey, Erica or Justin, would you mind helping her? I'm going to have them come help you because it might be related to your theme. So next week, we're going to start diving into Adobe. Has anybody here not downloaded Adobe? Any of the products? Okay. Do you guys have an invitation waiting from IT? Okay, so this is really important. I want everybody who hasn't downloaded Adobe to send me an email. You guys should all have my email. I've sent you stuff before. If you don't, let me write it down again.
Do you have a link from Fall? Will it still work?
It might not, so shoot me an email. My handwriting's not the greatest. Can you guys make that up? It's Courtnem. Courtnem. It's like a weird mashup of my name. So shoot me an email so I can make sure you guys get an invite because you're going to need Photoshop for next week. And if you need any help downloading it, you can always come in and see me or any of us at the help desk because we want you guys to be ready to go for next week. And on that note, because we're going to start digging into the software, there's just a few things I want to tell you. I love my laptop to death. She's with me all the time. But I will tell you, when you start getting into the Adobe software, you don't want to be doing this all the time. It's not efficient, like, when you're using your trackpad, and your fingers are going to get really tired. It's not really good for when you start dealing with the detail in these programs. So I know it sounds 1990s, but if you guys have an old school mouse anywhere, I'd bring it and or purchase one. We do have some in here that we can probably loan out, but I don't think I have enough for the whole class. So if you have a mouse, just a simple mouse, go ahead and bring it. It's going to make your lives a lot easier. The second thing is, in a few weeks, we're going to start getting into video. And when you're shooting video, it's just a really good idea to start coming up with a good workflow. And to do that, you want to have what's called a scratch drive. And that means having a separate external drive that you use for all of your media. So if you guys already have an external drive or you want to consider getting one, we can walk you through how to format it to use it for Premiere. But it's a really good idea to kind of keep that stuff separate. It can really clog up your computer. And it's also pretty slow when you're editing on Premiere if everything is on your laptop. It's going to slow you down. So consider bringing a hard drive. The last thing I want to show you, how many of you guys have used Lynda before? Let me see a show of hands. One. So this is this really cool resource you guys have. I love telling people about cool new free things they have they didn't even know about. Lynda.com is an incredible site. There's any piece of software you can ever imagine you want to learn. There's tutorials on there. And USC pays for you guys to have unlimited access to the site. It's a really cool thing. I used to pay for it on my own. It's like a couple $100 a year. So it's cool that you guys have it. And as we start digging into the Adobe software, we're going to be doing stuff in here. You guys have the help desk. There's tons of stuff on our site. But just know that you can always go to lynda.com. There's hundreds and hundreds of hours of Adobe related content on there. So it's a really great resource for you guys to kind of have. All right, so we are going to dig into some design today. Just kind of piggybacking off of what we've talked about in class. We kind of talked about this the other day when we were starting to look at some of the film clips that Professor Trope showed, and we're kind of digging through what the director or the producers of something might have meant when they were putting it together. But everything we're essentially doing in this class, we want to start thinking about story, right? Everything has a story. Everything has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Whether you're talking about, you know, just a photograph or a video or a film or a piece of music, like everything we do has that. So I want you guys to start really thinking about everything as a story and what that means, especially as critical thinkers, which we've been doing in class. So to start off, I want to talk a bit about color. Who's familiar with Pantone? Yeah, a few of you. I love Pantone. I can just spend hours flipping through all the colors. They didn't create color by any means, but they're sort of like the gods of color. Like any possible color you can imagine, you can find a color chip through Pantone, and they give you the hex code for it, the levels for it, how to make it. It's a great place to start playing around with color. They also make some really cool like mugs and products too, of which I have a few. And every year to kind of, I don't want to say shape fashion or trends, but it definitely kind of has an effect. They come out with a color of the year. Usually it's a color. This year they kind of threw us for a curveball, and they gave us two. Does anyone know what they are? Yeah, exactly. It's rose quartz and serenity. So if you guys want to be super hip and trendy as you're putting your sites together, these are the colors of 2016. So rose quartz and serenity.
It looks very like unicorn magical. Like,
I know, right?
fantastical.
Wait, people are dyeing their hair these colors?
Yeah, I was
It's like
like,
Really?
a really popular trend.
Yeah.
Wait, like the, what's it called? The
Ombre thing?
the ombre?
No,
it's
it's
like
fully-
there are people that are dyeing their entire hair one of those colors, and like a
Really?
grayish color, it's the newest trend.
Yeah.
Well, shoot, I need to,
I was just gonna say that.
I might need to dye my hair.
Wait, how did these choose?
You know, it's a really good question. It's kind of like the Academy Awards where there's like secret.
Just like the
It's
academy.
completely arbitrary.
Yeah. It's kind of like designers sit around waiting. It's like when the smoke comes out for the Pope. Like, what are the colors going to be? So it's always like a,
Weird, but
it's like a big deal when they come out in a lot of industries. So
unicorns are in, okay?
yeah, so this is the year of unicorn. So
Heck yeah.
think of unicorns when you're designing. So here's a monstrosity. This is actually a real website.
Why?
I know why, right? So let's just have a little bit of fun and dissect it for a second. There's a bazillion things wrong with this. Can you guys just give me a few? Everything,
Focus on
right, in all
anything.
caps. So what are the biggest problems? Can't focus on anything.
I have no idea what's a link, what's random. Too many words.
Colors, right? Clutter, space.
There's so many exclamation points.
Kind of like it.
Yeah? Why you like it? It's just the,
I feel like
It's
Yvette
kinda
is
different.
screaming and vomiting.
It's just the
I mean, I don't think
cluster.
it's a good website.
It's a
but
mess.
like,
Yes, everything.
It looks
Well-
like a collage piece of art that you would put.
It's an actual site. I'm sad to tell you. My eyes just don't even know where to go. It's just such a cluster.
There's so
Um,
now
many
that I see it again,
problems.
it looks like a MySpace page to me.
It does. So, I mean, there's even Cyrillic on there. It's just, it's a crazy mess. So again, what story are you trying to tell? Like, I'm sure Yvette's really wants somebody to go there. They're not telling a very good story.
Where's FirstComFitness.com/Carol P?
Who
That's
knows?
irrelevant.
It's just a nightmare. Mary Kay Cosmetics. All right, so moving on. So again, color is pretty important, right? There was so much color going on in that, and my eyes just couldn't even make out what was what. I couldn't even tell when there was like a word on top of a color because it was another bright color. So color has a lot to do with the story we tell, and it's kind of a fun one to play with. 'Cause, I mean, is anyone here colorblind? No? Okay, good. It's all around us all the time, and it's fun. You can really tell a fun story with color. So again, I'm not trying to insult anyone's intelligence. We all know these things, but it's good to just start thinking about them. What's a warm color versus a cool color? Any ideas? Yeah.
So cool colors are mostly like the blues and the greens. Like you think of cool lighting, so it's like very it's like on that side of the color scale.
Yeah.
And then a warm color would be like the reds, yellows.
Right. And why do you think we associate temperature with these colors when we see them?
What was the question?
Like, why do you think we associate like a temperature when we look at these colors? Like, why do we think hot when we look at red? Why do we think cool when we look at blue?
Like science and nature.
Right.
It's just how things
It's
are.
exactly right. It's like Mother Nature telling us like what these colors mean. And you know, as a human, we're always going to most likely associate that feeling with these colors. So again, cool versus warm, and you want to think about that when you're using these colors, because it's kind of a physical sensation that we get. It's human nature, right? It's in us. Like, we're going to have that reaction. So you want to think about that when you're using these colors. Harmonious colors, again, Mother Nature's a great little storyteller here with colors. These are colors that are next to each other in a color wheel, and these are colors that you'll see in nature if you start really paying attention. You know, again, speaking of Pantone, there's billions of colors, but just a basic color wheel is a nice way for you guys to start thinking about color and color theory. So again, harmonious colors are next to each other when you look at a color wheel. Complementary colors are across from each other. So again, we have red, and what's directly across from it, green. What do you think of when you think of those two colors? Did I hear Christmas? Right? But Christmas is man-made, right? Christmas didn't just come from Mother Nature. Somehow, way back when, some designer, it'd be interesting to find out who, thought, oh, a great way to tell the story of Christmas is to put these two colors side by side. And whenever we see those colors, we associate them with a man-made holiday. But if you kind of look around in nature, you don't see those colors together too often. I mean, once in a while you see them like in holly and like trees with berries, but in general, you don't see complementary colors as much. Erica just brought to my attention that Adobe just renamed this app again. It started out as Adobe Cooler, it changed to color, and now it's Adobe Capture. But again, for those of you that have already signed up for Adobe, I highly recommend you download this app. It's really, really cool. It's a fun way to play around with color. And for those of you that haven't, when you get it, I recommend downloading it. What it does is you can essentially open this app and just go around a room, and it pulls up all the colors that you're seeing and the patches for them. And then again, thinking about harmonious colors and complementary and pairing colors together to tell your story, you can start playing around with the app, and it'll give you options like, here's some colors to think about pairing with this. Here are some accents. So it's a really fun one to play around with. There's also a plugin for it in Photoshop, which I'll show you when we start digging into Photoshop. But just know that the app is there, and it's really fun to play around with. All right, I won't dig into this too much, but I just want you guys to be aware of what these things mean when you start seeing them. Does anyone want to take a stab at what this is? Have you ever seen this before? Yeah.
Isn't it the three colors that are on your computer / your printer, and when you combine them, it makes those other colors?
Yep. In colors that cancel each other out. So that's exactly what it is. So how many have seen those letters C, M, Y, K before? Yeah. Does anyone know what that means?
Cyan, yellow, magenta.
Getting close.
Those letters?
So you see C, M, Y, K sometimes, and you'll see this when you start digging around into the Adobe software. These are some of the printing options that you guys have, and they have to do with color. So just quickly, C, M, Y, K is for if you're printing something from an actual printer, so like print design. We're not going to be doing that in class because everything we're doing here is web-based. But when you see C, M, Y, K, it's those 4 colors, and that's for like physically printing something out. We're dealing with the other 3 in here, which can anyone tell me what those are? What's this? Yep, red, green, blue, RGB. And so those are web-based colors. So that's the color world that you guys are going to be dealing with in this class. So just know the quick difference between those 2. So again, like I said, you see a lot of harmonious colors in nature, especially if you start paying attention to flowers and plants, things that are very vibrant in nature. So just start taking photos of these things, notice them. Notice, again, think about the temperature of these colors and where you find them, how it makes you feel. Just start really playing around with color. It's around us every day. Like I said, really bright primary colors. You don't often find a lot of them next to each other in nature. I mean, you can, but it's not as often. This is, here you have kind of muted colors like a sky and sand, and then suddenly these really, really bright beach cottages, which it's appealing. It makes you want to stay in them. These are in South Africa. But I wanted to bring this to your attention too, because what do you guys notice about the clouds, speaking of color? I know it's a little hard to tell with the lighting in here and the projector. But the brights are really saturated and bright, but the clouds are a little bit off. And that's called white balance. So it just looks slightly unnatural. Even though these houses are really bright in real life, just the color, the white's a little bit off. So it's just, it's something you guys want to pay attention to, especially when we start shooting video. You always want to make sure that the natural white in whatever you're shooting is the actual white. All right, so moving on, like I said, color is all around us everywhere. Does anyone recognize this currency? This is the new Norwegian currency that they just put out there. And I'm bringing it up. I mean, I think it's really nice design, but again, like things we don't always associate with color sometimes can have color. So even though God Bless America, our greenbacks have a little bit of color in them now. In other countries, there can be a lot of color going on, and something as simple as money that you're using every day. Again, textiles. Has anyone traveled in Latin America or in Mexico or seen any? They do a wonderful job with just really playing with color in a lot of the textiles. Around here, if you guys haven't been there before, during Dia de los Muertos, that the community is very involved in around here, you can just see some really, really brilliant colors and use of color. So again, just start thinking of these things and playing around. So next I want to move on to fonts, because again, we talked about mise-en-scène. I know everyone loves that word, right? In terms of breaking down those clips in class yesterday, it's the same thing. It translates into anything you're doing, whether it's a website or you're doing print design. Again, anything in that frame, like that horrible website we looked at, it's mise-en-scène. It's telling a story. So it isn't just the photo, it's also the font, the colors, everything else in there is a piece of it. So there's essentially 4 different categories of fonts: serif, sans serif, script, and display. Does anyone know what types of font the Law and Order logo was that we looked at in class? Serif. It was a serif font, and I would say it's also a display font, because it was really big and all caps, and it was kind of telling you like Law and Order, like justice system. Like it was a really like kind of a loud presence, right? So again, think about the types of fonts you guys are using. I know on your WordPress sites, I mentioned this the other day, they already have what's called CSS built into the themes. So a lot of the style of the theme that you're using is already built in. But you know, you guys can still be playing around with fonts, you know, in your, depending on what you're doing with photos. For those of you that have a site that has like a nice header image at the top, you could always consider like writing your name in a certain font or making a little logo and then adding that on the photo and putting it up there. So I mean, you guys can play around with fonts on your site as well. So again, going back to everything as a story, you know, if you're writing about something pretty serious, or, you know, the tone is serious, you want to be really careful with the kind of font you use. Like, what do you guys think of when you look at this font?
It's like not serious.
Yeah, it's just like whimsical and childish, right? So probably don't want to be using a font that's going to set that kind of tone when I'm writing about the Syrian refugee crisis. I mean, it's not a very funny topic at all. Again, ISIS, it looks like a cartoon.
Make it cute.
Everyone knows this horrible font, right?
God.
I don't want to see it anywhere. There's no story you could possibly tell. We're not dealing with like preschool here. Just please.
Come to love what it's meant like online when
I know.
people use it so sarcastically or, you know, like belittling and stuff. I think
You
it's so
can.
funny.
I'll probably get it. But at this point, it's been so overused. There's other funny fonts you guys could be ironic with. Again, Black Lives Matter. We've been hearing a lot about this. So these are pretty serious topics. So again, you want to set the tone if you're writing about these visually with the font that you use. And not to say, I mean, there's a lot of fun fonts out there, and I encourage you guys to play with them. As part of the Creative Cloud, actually, there's a whole font kit that you guys can play around with. And I encourage you to, because again, fonts are a storytelling tool, mise en scène. Like, you can really, really make your message powerful by the font that you choose. So again, this one works here, but you know, this wouldn't work if I'm writing about ISIS. So, and lastly, I mean, this again is like similar to the horrible website we looked at. Use fonts sparingly, you guys. Like, you don't want to use a bunch of fonts. I don't care what you're writing about. It just becomes noise and clutter. So think about the font you're using, again, not only the tone that you're telling, but how they work against each other and kind of, you know, what you're putting out there. Again, a lot of your themes already have these built in. A lot of times there'll be like a display font that's separate from like the font that you're using when you're writing just the body of your blog. And then, you know, there's also the script fonts, but just, you know, think about these things as you guys are creating. All right, what do you guys see here? Right? Does anyone know what that's called?
Cool veil.
Does anyone not see the problem with this packaging?
I always find it kind of
Yeah. I know, I want to put these all over my house, right? So this is called kerning. So as you guys are playing around with fonts, sometimes fonts are really stylized, but you need to be careful because it might just be two particular letters that you have next to each other. The way the font is designed, just give it an alternate meaning. So kerning means like going in and creating space between characters. So we can play around with that in Photoshop, but again, it's just something I want you guys to be mindful of. So again, here, what's going on here? Can anyone tell? This is just starting a brand new website.
You're supposed to be able to read that?
Right, you can't read it, right? So somebody went in here like, oh, I want to use a cool background image for the background of my site, but the problem is you can't really read anything on top of it. It's way too loud. So there's a couple things you could do. Again, you could play with color. I can actually see that orange at the top pretty well against the grayscale. So I could play with, you know, having my font kind of pop out in a different color. The other thing I could do is with this particular theme, and you guys might see this in some of your themes, if I really do want to have that pattern or that texture as the background of my site, then I might want to think about going to a boxed version of my theme. And again, depending on your theme, some of them might have this option. So consider doing that because it makes it easier to read and some nice contrast. White space is just something I want you guys thinking about. This example of Pottery Barn is just showing you on a website, but white space isn't always white, as you can see just from a poster to the right. It's just about thinking about breathing room and space because you don't want a lot of clutter. Like, you need some free space on whatever page you're working with. again, a lot of your themes is already going to take care of that for you, but just start being mindful, bless you, of these elements as you guys go along. So let's talk a little bit about photo composition. Like I said, you guys are going to start manipulating images that other people shot, but I want you guys to start taking more photos and just really playing around with your phone and all these things that we're talking about today. It's not an official assignment. I'm just asking you guys to start playing around and get your creative juices flowing, because most of us are, in fact all of you are, because I got the survey results, carrying these phones around every day. So start using them. Just play around. I mean, even if you shoot a bunch of stuff and delete it, just start really getting a feel for the stuff that we're talking about. So which image do you prefer? Number 2? Does anyone choose number 1? No? Why? She knows. What is it?
Because the chair is put into the law rule of thirds, so it's just like more aesthetically pleasing to the human brain.
Exactly. So rule of thirds. Has anyone not heard of rule of thirds before? All right. So if everyone pretty much knows this, we can go through it quickly. You want to think of your frame as divided into these 9 parts. Again, any creative rule can always be broken, but I would encourage you to pay attention to this one, because it's a really great place to start. So I'll just move through a few of these here quickly. Again, this is a really nice example of a pulled focus, but this pair is just a little more interesting off to the side. You wouldn't be as drawn to it if it were in the center like the chair was. Same thing here. I spent a lot of time on the ocean, and almost all the photos I saw that students would take shooting off the side of the ship out into the ocean, where do you think the line was between the sky and the horizon?
Dead center.
Yeah, it's always cut in half, and it's just not as interesting. So again, especially when you're shooting landscapes, think of it in 3 parts. So here we have 2 parts land and 1 part sky, but you can also have 2 parts sky and just 1 part land. But it's so much more pleasing to the eye. And it doesn't have to be landscape. You can also think of the same rule of thirds when you're shooting portraits. So just know that that's there, and I want you to take out your phones. If you guys don't have the grid already on there, it's built into your iPhones. I apologize to the Android users. I only have an iPhone, but I'm sure it's in there somewhere. But go ahead and turn on your grid at least for a couple days and just kind of play around with rule of thirds when you're shooting photos. All right, we touched on this in class the other day, so I'm not going to spend too much time. But again, you want to start playing around with different angles, and you're going to notice these as you start digging through these iconic images. So this is a low angle. Just this one just really gives you that sense of the starting line, because you're down there at the feet where the action's going to start. And again, you guys talked about this in class. What does a low angle usually send? What message? Yeah, power. You're larger than life. Like, you look really big. You see it a lot with like Fortune 500 CEO shots. A lot of times you'll see them with like the building, and like start paying attention to publicity materials. You'll see these angles used a lot because they have to do with power. So same thing, there's also a high angle. How many of you guys have a million photos of your cat or dog at this angle? Right? Because this is what we see. We're just always shooting them from above. But again, there's a power associated with it. So if we're shooting extreme high angles of people, it makes them look small. So again, if you guys are out shooting some CEO, they're not going to be happy if you shoot this extreme high angle of them, right? Because it's gonna bruise their little ego, because it's gonna make them look small. So you can play around with angles and perspective. You can also, where is your eye drawn to in this photo? Any ideas? Yeah, there's a woman in the middle, right? So it's kind of purposely framed so that your eye is going to go to one point. So you can, again, play around with that type of composition. The other nice thing going on here is symmetry. You could pretty much draw a line down this frame, and both sides are the same. So that's a fun thing to play around with. Uh-oh. America knows. Again, play around with symmetry. It's all around us. For those of you that have DSLRs, you might have macro lenses to play with if you do play around. Our phones are actually really great at taking macro photos. You can get pretty close to something and get detail. So just think about that when you guys are shooting photos. I mean, we all get lazy and we just kind of take a bunch of these all the time, right? Because all we have to do is put our hand out. But get up close to things, like take a few close-up shots. Just gives you a whole different perspective on something. Texture is another one. I know when we think of photography, a lot of times you only think of the visual sense. But again, anytime you're doing something creative and you're seeing it, you can tap into all different types of senses. So, you know, when I look at this photo, this elephant, what do you guys want to do? I want to touch it, right? Like, oh, I wonder what that feels like. So, you know, if you see something with really interesting texture, like get a close-up photo of it because it's going to make somebody get that sense when they look at it. Does anyone know what these are called, this type of angle? What is it?
Shooting from the hip, or
Yeah, that's actually true.
ended.
Yep. Shooting from the hip. It's a Dutch or a canted angle, and that's when you take life and just turn it on its side a little bit. So if you shot this sidewalk straight on, there probably wouldn't be that much going on, but the fact that it's turned a little bit, it just gives you more of a sense of commotion happening here. There's two things going on here. So what do you guys feel when you look at this photo? What emotion?
Almost dizzy.
Dizzy? Anything else? What was that? Yeah. Fear, like suspense, right? Like there's something a little bit spooky about it. So again, flipping this angle on its side, it just gives you that suspenseful feeling. And then we're also playing around with lighting here. Does anyone know what this lighting effect is called? No? What is it?
Silhouette.
Yeah. Silhouette, or it's also called film noir. You'll see this in like a lot of the old Hitchcock films or horror films. Like they play with shadows and light and it makes you feel scared. All right, and speaking of shadows, they're all around us. That's a fun thing to play with too when you guys are out there shooting, especially in LA where we have, you know, like 360 days of sunshine. It makes for some pretty great shadows. So play around with those. Point of view is a good one. How many of you guys have GoPros? Nobody? One? So I know you guys are out there doing pretty cool things, right? Some of you guys are in sports, you're on your bikes, you're snowboarding, whatever you're doing. Turn the camera around sometimes or put it here and give us your perspective. Because if I just saw this bike, you know, it really gives me the sense that I'm on the bike because it's from the point of view of sitting on it. So I'm seeing this is exactly what I would feel like if I were this person on a bike. So think about point of view. That means putting your hands in it. You know, if you're in a parachute, get a photo with your feet in it so you can see what it's like looking down. Otherwise, it just looks like you're taking a photo from an airplane. So think about like putting your own point of view in the frame. I talked about animals again. We all have a million photos like this, right? Play around with eye levels. Like, look how much more interesting the world is when it's from the dog's eye level. So get down, like, especially if you're around animals, like take a few, you know, on the ground next to them. See what the world looks like from their point of view. All right, so we've been talking about perspective. This happened last year. Does anyone know what this photo is of? The blood moon, right? Remember how we had 4 blood moons? And there's something kind of special about the last one. Was anyone here for it?
During an eclipse of some sort?
It was during an eclipse. Yes. So this wasn't just the blood moon, right? This was a super blood moon. But I can't really tell from this photo. I mean, it's in focus. I can tell it's red, but I can't really tell that it's super, right? But when I see this image that was in the HuffPost, now I can tell that it's not just an orangish color, but it's also huge, right? It's really close to the horizon. Yeah. So think about perspective.
But it has to be like at a certain point, not ours. Because
It does, but I'm just saying with any photo,
Yeah.
like you want to have perspective in it, otherwise you can't tell.
because it didn't look like that from the like our hemisphere.
Well, it wasn't here.
Yeah.
I think it was in the UK.
Yeah.
So you also Think about foreground too. Like this mountain in New Zealand is beautiful, but it's not going anywhere. So again, rule of thirds, having something in that foreground just gives you something else to look at. It makes the frame a little bit more interesting. So play around with background and foregrounds as well, and kind of having different layers to your frame. What do you guys notice when you look at this photo? It's the first thing. Anyone? Bueller? No guesses? I heard a lot of marshmallows in the last session.
Carol, her teeth, and the fact that just that white color pops so
Yeah.
much.
That is really great about this photo. It's very nice. This photo, you do notice her teeth and her marshmallows, but you also notice her eyes. And I mention it because whenever you're shooting people, that's what we're used to looking at, right? You're always looking at somebody's eyes when you look at them. So just pay attention to people's eyes when you're shooting photos of them. And when you guys start editing photos, you also, does everyone see this right here? So you'll start noticing when you take photos of people, I mean, sometimes you have red eye you need to fix, but it's pretty natural to always have a little bit of a glare in our eyes. So as you guys start going in and, you know, taking things out of photos, if I took that out of her eyes, she would look like a zombie. She would suddenly look lifeless because it's just not natural. Like, we're not used to seeing that. So when you guys start going in and retouching and manipulating images, just remember, eyes are very important for people. It's how we identify with each other. So you don't want to take that away because you want them to feel real. I mean, unless you guys are turning someone into a zombie, which you could be doing for that assignment, which could be kind of fun. And the last thing is, again, we were talking about white space before. You want to think about positive and negative space as well. So again, here my eyes are drawn to the sky between these buildings, not necessarily the buildings. So you guys can play around with that too in your photography. That's all I have for you guys. There was a game we did earlier, but we kind of ran out of time in this session, so I apologize, but I think that's all we have. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah. Some help with their menu? Yeah, we'll come over to you. Yeah, if anyone wants to hang around and needs help with their blog, I'm happy to come around.
Also, before you head out, there is a sign-in sheet on that table near the door. It's going to be there from now on, so be sure as you come in or as you head out to sign in so we can get you for attendance. Also, send me your blog link.